Welcome again to American Zarathustra. It is a great pleasure for me to introduce someone I have followed online on and off over the years. I'm quite fascinated with her. Her work it goes in depth on all kinds of topics, but I'm specifically interested in her research and discussion on Western religions, Abrahamic religions. Please welcome Claire Khaw. Lovely to meet you, Claire.
Hello, thanks for having me on your show.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. So I guess just a quick review for people who are new to you. I always advocate to newcomers to my show. If you could maybe just give a sort of a brief uh, biography, why you've gotten into vlogging and what are the topics you find interesting, maybe some highlights of your show.
Oh, my actual YouTube channel. Well, they feature political and religious ideas. I think politics and religion are really one and the same thing.
Mm.
And I've been talking to quite a few interesting people, and I love the way it's actually quite easy to produce content of me talking to whoever, and some of them I think have been quite um, amusing and entertaining in their own right, and it wasn't done intentionally, but
Mm.
I find myself the whole thing tremendously enjoyable and
Mm.
perhaps too addictive.
I can definitely understand that and agree with that as well. I was just listening to your discussion with E. Michael Jones, which I feel was a bit heated at some points there, but it was very, very interesting. And of course, in my mind, I'm going through what I would say had I been, in that conversation as well. What are some highlights of your show? Some of your favorite shows that you've done?
Well, E. Michael Jones, I was so lucky to have him because you know he's a man on a mission.
Oh yeah.
And so he's more or less prepared to talk to anyone, and he was for a while just ubiquitous, and so he agreed to speak to me, and I was so grateful. And it was actually my first video, and I kind of struck gold. It's like there I was. I thought I'd go, have a first video, and there he was,
Wow.
and the first two videos, my first two videos ever were
Wow.
with him. So I thank my lucky stars.
Well, you got that's fabulous. That's really interesting. I've certainly, followed a number of his shows, watched him, familiar with his ideas, and it's interesting to see people go back and forth. In our sphere, there's a lot of different opinions and positions, etc. And I just find the whole thing very enriching and enjoyable. People are going to come to their own conclusions about things, but I feel that if you're not investigating and getting into some rigorous discussion, then you're at a loss. We have a very rich kind of online sphere, online culture, so that's really cool.
Mm.
What are some specialty areas that you're interested in, like
Well,
specific topics?
politics and religion, and I've just sort of found this really triggering idea called secular Quranism, which is basically Sharia as I interpret it, and it seems to me so perfectly logical that I don't see how, if you're Westerner and you think, oh, Western civilization is declining, and what shall we do? And I think, well, that Sharia is obviously the answer because, it would correct feminism, it would correct liberalism, it would kick out intersectional feminism and deal with the Jews.
Mm. So there's a lot to unpack there. I think, for starters, try to get a couple definitions clear. I would start off by saying that it sounds like a very hard sell because of the essential, you know, terrorism, essentially Islamic extremism, all these experiences, the influx of Muslims into Western countries, the conflict that goes with that. How do you sidestep all of that? Because I don't think that Westerners would even come to the table to consider this thought.
Well, I think it goes even beyond this perception of Muslims being terrorists. I mean, I can easily explain that the reason why there appear to be so many Muslim terrorists is that they are almost invited to come to the West as cheap labor after their countries have been destroyed by NATO. So you don't even have, in the olden days, um, countries would invade each other,
Yeah.
and then get the slaves. I come to your country, I invade it, I conquer it, and I take your people as slaves. And what NATO seems to be doing is that we'll bomb these countries, and then those people will automatically go to them. We don't even have to ship them there. So they'll arrive in Europe in large numbers as migrants, and there's their cheap labor. Hooray!
Mm-hmm.
And you think, well, why don't they make their own working classes work? Good question. They're never going to talk about it because, oh, but that would mean that democracy would make it impossible for this sort of thing to be done. You know, I mean, you have your own working classes. For some reason, they're too busy watching daytime TV, getting fat while on benefits, and not working. And
Mm-hmm.
nobody dares to tell them that perhaps they should be working. Or
Yeah.
and it's because of democracy. You don't want to alienate them by saying that they're a bunch of lazy so and so's, and it's time for them to find some work, because you've got generations of these people who would be shocked and be triggered and melt like a snowflake in the sun.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are all these taboos, I think, in the West that cannot be questioned, these sacred cows, which is why it is so triggering, because, if it is true that Christianity is kaput, then you need a new religion, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
It's not some decoration. I think a lot of people think, oh, Christianity, it's our beautiful cathedrals, it's I don't know, motets and choral music and that kind of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
and yes, it can be very beautiful and very decorative and cultural, but really the purpose of religion is to give you these rules that maybe we don't want to obey all the time, and enforce them. And that's the only way to keep any society going. I mean, particularly with regard to parenting the next generation. And of course, feminism has utterly destroyed the idea that we should marry before having children, and stay together even if we're bored with our spouses, for the sake of the children. And that, I think, increases the likelihood of underachievement, mental illness, child abuse, all these unhealthy things that make people unable to do what their ancestors used to do.
Mm-hmm. Can I interrupt you quickly? Just to help to bring context to everything that you're saying, because we're flying by a million important topics that each could be unpacked. I think for starters, I'd like to try to understand your religious or spiritual orientation. How do you process the world spiritually?
Um, I guess I'm not really a spiritual person. I see the need to believe in something, some deity for others, but I've arrived at my solution from a purely practical standpoint. In terms of spirituality, um, I think it's a good feeling that we get when we think we're following the rules correctly.
Mm-hmm.
But I think even when we think we are following the rules correctly, we might be wrong. But anyway, the spirituality that we enjoy when we think we are in harmony with the world and God, and that whole idea, it's a very um, what's the word? Well, it's a special feeling that you occasionally get,
Sure.
which maybe some people take drugs to achieve, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose people talk about it as the, the nirvana, the um, end thing. But I don't think you can be enlightened um, if you get this high and you think, oh, I'm in a new level of spirituality. I think it's subjective, and we may actually be wrong when we feel so wonderful because it was just drug induced or something.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I guess I have to be focused on the idea that we're supposed to be able to work it out using our faculties
Hmm.
of reason.
Hmm.
So, if we think Western civilization is declining, the terrible problems, nobody's talking about them, and we work them out, and you think, well, that's because the moral system of Christianity has failed and has been failing for centuries, and we just haven't noticed because it was substituted by liberalism, and liberalism is now failing. Why do we think it's failing? And I'm saying it's because it hasn't got an official handbook, it hasn't got scripture, so corrupt politicians will just, put their own stamp on liberalism, and it's whatever,
Hmm.
the leader of any political party says it is. And this, okay, you asked me about my spirituality, and I guess I'm trying to say that when I promote my ideas, I guess I must feel some kind of faith that it will be worth it in the end. But I also think all political activists must be optimists, because why would they do it if they were not?
Hmm.
All the backbiting, the sneering, the mockery, uh, the defamation,
Okay.
the things
I,
the things that your own side say about you. I mean,
mhm.
why, unless you're crazy, why would you do it?
So let me back up a little bit. Just so that I think I'm clear on what I'm hearing from you. You're coming from, I guess, an agnostic perspective, using purely rational, purely rational approach to, religion we need to create or find a religion that is a system of rules that will save Western civilization. Is that, and you suggest secular Islam. Am I correct?
Islam is a belief system. It's actually a religion. Secular Quranism is a legal system, and I distinguish it from being a belief system simply because it doesn't insist on anyone believing in whatever. As long as you obey the law, you can believe what you like. So it's not a religion in the sense that, if you want to become Christian, you have to believe that Jesus is God. If you want to, become Muslim, you have to undergo some process of swearing in, so to speak.
Mm-hmm, hmm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, I would just quickly say this from my perspective. My goal is saving Western civilization, specifically the people who who created, which would be, people of European descent. And I don't believe that Islam is, how do I say, matches or will work with Westerners, with whites, if you want to put it that way. And we could discuss that and break that down into a lot of minutia points, but I wanted to kind of put that out there on the map of this discussion to just sort of say, allow you to understand my perspective a bit.
Oh, I certainly do. I know I have a very, very, very unpopular idea.
Well, there's
And
something here though that we need to. I'm trying to unpack. I'm trying to like dig down to the core of it. It's what I just heard in a sense was it's a system of law that, rather than say a religion or a spiritual practice, that is kind of a little more, I don't know, solid. And there's something about it that you believe would be useful to saving the West. Am I correct?
yes, because it would promote marriage and family values, and this is the thing that I think all advanced civilizations have. You really, because marriage is eugenic
Sure.
fundamentally, because it makes us choose our sex partners who must be our spouse more carefully.
Mm.
Um,
Well,
and it,
how is this different than, say, from, I don't know, any other religion, even outside of the West? Most countries have some kind of cultural norms or religious rules about marriage, etc. Why specifically Islam?
well, because Islam actually treats unmarried parents as sex offenders,
Hmm. Wow.
attracting corporal punishment, and that is, you know, I did try to think about, how one is to solve this problem. And
Wow.
you think, well, that's the only thing that will work now. I mean,
So it's
for
a,
Westerners.
for lack of a better term, it's I really don't like using this word, but I don't know what else to call it, a kind of legal slash religious extremism to solve the problems of progressivism, if you will, with degeneracy, the breaking apart of the family, and through punitive measures. Am I correct in this
Um,
understanding?
I would quarrel with the word extremism,
Right.
because
No.
I think ex to be extremist is to go beyond what is necessary to
Okay.
achieve a certain objective, and I frankly don't think anything short of that would even work now, because people are so um, they've been in this culture for so long that to actually suggest to them that you know that they might want to restrict their that they're not going to get it for ages and ages.
So the impression I'm having right now, in a sense, is that I hate to say this, but that in a way, the West right now is kind of like a naughty teenager, and that it needs to be punished in order to teach it how to behave in a way that's going to be good for it later. Is
Mhm.
this, does that make sense?
It makes total sense,
Yeah.
and thank you for illustrating it with such appropriate imagery.
Well, I have a 15-year-old son, so I'm going through that right now.
Ah,
But anyway, that's another
yes.
topic. But and I completely see that it's the infantilization of the West, the feminization of the West, the sense of look out for number one, live for the day, do whatever. That's garbage. That's destroying the West, and it's I don't know. You and I understand it. We don't need to lecture on it per se. I just feel that how would you institute such this sort of, as you call it, Sharia? How would you? I mean, it seems to me that Christianity already has hundreds of years. We have churches, we have structures, we have traditions, all of this that is woven tightly with the Western identity, um, regardless of paganism or all these other things. And it seems like, why don't we use what we currently have and then maybe have a Christian Sharia that is in some sense accomplishing the same effect?
Well, it's because of the construct of Christianity and its own peculiar history. Because once upon a time, we all know that Christianity worked, but there were certain peculiarities about it that is actually part of the. Um, okay, let me start from the beginning. When Christianity really worked, people were burnt at the stake for denying the divinity of Jesus. So, you had to be Christian if your monarch was Christian, because there was this idea that, if a European monarch was a particular religion, then so too would be his subjects. There was no such thing as, religious freedom until
Right.
the American Republic was founded.
Right. The
And
very
with its First
town.
Amendment,
Right.
which
The
was actually, in my view, based on Chapter 2, verse 256 of the Quran, which states, "There is no compulsion in belief. Truth stands clear from error." And I think it was after the founding of the passing of the First Amendment, in fact, in 1791, that made this idea of freedom of belief slowly percolate back to Europe, resulting in the French Revolution.
Mhm.
And we know what the French did. They beheaded their king, as well as a few Catholic priests and cardinals. Um, a cardinal, I suppose, because they were not happy with how Christianity worked on them.
Mhm.
So it was really France that had this idea of secularism, and yeah, I think that there was a play of ideas between the old and the new world,
Mhm.
and it was only a matter of time before the Europeans would say, well, if the Americans have this thing called freedom of belief, why can't we? And
Mhm.
eventually, they did get it, but a lot later.
Mhm.
And we have in Europe there is this thing now, and but it's not really helping, because people will just stop going to church. If they weren't forced to go into church, they won't go. And and
Well,
and, and then their children aren't confirmed. They
mhm.
lose this thing about their tradition.
I think I see a contradiction though in this, that so it seems to me that religion as punitive law is the opposite of spirituality. That, it okay, so the very town that I live in was founded by Germans who were escaping religious persecution. And this kind of thing it's sort of very real from my experience, where a lot of the early settlers came to interpret and live their Christian beliefs without being jailed or killed.
Mhm.
And so if we see it through that historic lens, where say the church or Christianity turned into a kind of Sharia, or European Christian Sharia, where people would be jailed or killed for not doing whatever they were supposed to do, following the state religion, then that how is that different than the secular Islam that you're recommending?
Well, do you, I think you must have got the impression that Muslims would persecute each other, but not to the extent of burning each other at the stake over denying the divinity of Jesus. But I think perhaps you conflate Muslims fighting each other for political reasons with Muslims disagreeing with each other on matters of religious doctrine. I don't know what you are thinking of when you think, well, Muslims are, even now killing each other over religious matters. I'm sure as a background there is some, political territorial dispute,
Hmm.
and people use religion as an excuse,
Hmm.
to demonize their enemy.
Yeah, it's very complex stuff. It really is. I always try to delineate politics, religion, and spirituality as three separate categories that are obviously interwoven, maybe not so much in certain cases, but my interest with you specifically, I think, is to dig into your perception of what is spirituality, because I feel that this discussion, not just this discussion, but the topic itself of religion and how it relates to saving the West, is more of a political thing rather than a spiritual subject. I know that that in itself sounds contradictory. People I know, devout Catholics and devout Christians who are, quite wonderful people and happy, and whatever, they're happy with their way, right? Um, but I guess I'm feeling like I really want to know what is the core of the Western biospirit, and what's the right spiritual path for us. Religions obviously are complex. There's dogma, there's so a lot of baggage, and once you
What
get
do you
in,
mean by spirituality, though? I've given
that's
you my
where
definition,
that's
but
where we're going. That's where I'm
uh,
trying to go with this conversation is, um, okay, so I'll bring in my own experience. So I was raised a devout Catholic. I wanted to be a priest when I was like 5 years old. I mean, granted I
mhm,
was five, but
mhm.
still, my family was deeply involved in the church. Uh, it was reality. I didn't see a reality outside of that in my little bubble of my American dream youth that I grew up in. So, and then at a young age, my father had a very severe illness, and we knew that he was going to die. And
Mhm.
then he died a month before I graduated high school, and that completely unraveled my life, catapulted me into chaos and darkness, and it was profoundly traumatic to me and my family. And I'll say we never really recovered as far as like the economic effects and all these other things that it just so I saw it. I felt like we were the perfect Christians. Why did God allow this to happen? That was my teenage mentality. And so it really shattered that relationship I had with faith and God and the church. Long story that maybe we could go into on your channel. We unpack that. There's a lot of fascinating stuff. But anyway, I found that Eastern religion was the answer for me, because it wasn't a thing where, okay, here's a guy with a robe and a book shaking his finger at me. If you don't believe this book, you go to hell, and all that's irrational to me. There has to be actual practices and like natural laws that I can tap into to have a spiritual experience and understand the nature of man, God, life, death, etc. So I found that through Taoism and Buddhism. And now I'm returning to Western thought, and I'm fascinated with things like Hermetics and Gnosticism. And then, trying to find where are these truths buried in or hidden within Christianity, just mainly because I can't undo who I am. You know, I'm a cultural Christian. There's a relationship with God that I have, and I feel this whole discussion, if it's not rooted solidly in spirituality, is kind of really not a religious discussion. It's a political discussion. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I understand now that you want to concentrate on the spiritual aspects of religion. And I would divide religion as between the public and the private purpose. And the private purpose, it would be matters of faith and conscience
Okay.
and spirituality, as you see it. And of course, it's important because without faith, we just wouldn't do anything at all. We wouldn't do anything challenging, would we? We would never take any risk because we would assume that, we might get hurt. Or we might not even do something because we think our feelings might get hurt. So I certainly think that spirituality is important. But I suppose I just didn't want people to think that I'm some sort of faith guru or that kind of speaker. I'm just saying, well, if you are reasonably certain that what you're doing is right, then you will be more likely to do it than if you're, always in a state of doubt about whether to do it or not. And you can see from how politicians act. Of course they do the right thing if it meant instant reward, but of course that's not how it's meant to be. According to the narrative of the Abrahamic God, you're supposed to do the right thing, even though it hurts.
This is
And people without religion won't be able to do that. They won't even know what a principle is.
mm-hmm.
Because that's what it is. A principle is doing something, always doing something, even if it hurts, or not doing something, even if it hurts. But without religion, people will have this, well, I will do it if I get the carrot, and I won't do it if I get the stick.
Yeah. See, this is the thing that whenever I have these kind of shows and I bring people on, I'm in a sense, I'm digging for gold. I want to find something between what you know and what I know, where we cross over our knowledge bases and we see, well, how does it connect? Where's the gold? What can we pull out of this that we didn't know before? So I really appreciated your putting it that, religion has a public side and a private side. And my whole approach has always been the private side. My personal practice, relationship with God is nothing to do with public, but yet I get how morality, say, is a relationship. Spirituality is how we relate to people in the world and these things. But so anyway, I'm listening to you and I'm making a kind of list of public and private aspects of religion. So public morality, private faith, public customs, and then private spirituality. And in the public, you'd have ceremonies like marriage and death, these kind of things. In the private, you have natural law, meditation, prayer, these things. But in the public side, as we go down this list, I'm beginning to think of things like dogma, which then leads to politics, which then leads to war. And so, whereas in the private aspect of religion, faith, spirituality, meditation, prayer lead to peace. So I think if we're going to have this discussion about religion as a political tool to save the West, it seems to me that people should be, in some regard, cultivating more of their personal spiritual capacities. Does that make sense?
Well, yes, I think contemplation is helpful in generating faith. And of course, you should periodically examine your conscience,
Sure.
and this is the whole point of confession and regular prayer.
Mm.
And if people don't do that anymore, they won't even be examining what they did wrong. And the thing is, even if we don't believe in God, um, I think probably quite a few atheists still inadvertently pray because they really want something to happen or not happen. And when you get into this state of wanting to believe in God who might help you, um, you will be in a state of bargaining with that
Mm-hmm.
deity,
Mm-hmm.
saying, "Well, I've been a good boy, I've
Yeah.
done all the things, and so you should give it to me." Or
Yeah.
you'll be saying, "I know I've been terrible, I've done all these wrong things, but I'll be good if you give it
Yeah.
to me." You know,
Yeah.
but at least you will be forced to think about your past behavior in order to make this bargain. Even if the deity doesn't even exist, it will have the effect of making you examine your life. Well, now people just take another pill to
Yeah.
avoid feeling depressed.
Sure. So what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is in a sense cultivating a public that has a conscience and that, in a sense, uses the system of religion to confess and to follow laws that create a cohesive structure that holds society together. Um, there's a lot more I have to say about it, but I just want to see, is this what you're thinking?
Well, you need people to want to follow those laws, right?
Mhm.
Because and you have decided what these laws are,
Okay.
because you can't say, well, I'll make something up, on God's behalf,
Yeah.
to suit me, and it can't be that because somebody else might get the same idea. Well, I'll make my laws up to suit me, and then there will be a lot of fighting. So unfortunately, you have to go back to scripture because it's the highest authority for whatever religion you happen to be promoting. and
Yeah.
and then you have to kind of grade all the other scripture, like which is the most morally authoritative
Well,
scripture.
yeah, my take on this is that the failure of Christianity is because of this I've been a good boy, give me a treat, or don't punish me begging mentality. I don't think our relationship to God should be bargaining, and I think when that, in a sense, infantilizes us, it's a childlike way to interact with God and life and yourself. And I think it's demeaning and demoralizing to find yourself begging all the time. And I don't even think God wants that. I mean,
No.
we haven't even
And
discussed
we have to
what
remember
God.
to
So
thank him, when we get our stuff, right?
that's right.
And a lot of people don't.
Well,
They
there's
only.
sure, and a lot of it has to do with the maturity of the individual, how far they go into contemplation. But where I'm going with this is that if it's the failure, uh, if Western civilization is falling apart due to partially Christianity failing, etc., then why is it failing? And that's what I'm trying to get at here with this, with like, let's discuss spirituality rather than religion. Now, I'm not an authority on Christianity. I have friends that can quote the Bible off the top of their head and they're quite wise about it. But there is this question of, well, why do we need the religion or the Bible to tell us what's right and wrong? Are we not rational enough to understand or create morality? Why does it
Well,
be grounded in a religion?
yes, we all think we're honest and logical, but the fact is that we will all be then we'll be all be competing against each other. And I suppose we have to choose a religion simply because, at least we know that, like, well, it's a religion of, some ancient religion, and it has more authority than us mortal and fallible individuals. So,
So
there is no time to say, oh, well, I'm going to start a kind of church of, I don't know, a new religion. If you
yeah.
if you started a new religion, it would take too long,
Hmm.
right? So that's never the idea. I think the idea is like, well, you have to use the best available moral system that already has been established.
Hmm.
And if your society is failing, maybe it's because your moral system was always meant to fail,
Hmm.
because it's not the latest one. It's not monotheism Mark 3, because it's only Mark 2, if it's Christianity. And so you have to work out why Christianity has failed, and then think, well, is there anything better around? And then you think, oh, maybe Islam, because it can't be Hinduism and it can't be Buddhism, because there's no rule of law in either Hinduism or Buddhism, or none that are sort of, structured and coherent enough. Because that, I mean, frankly, Islam is an imperial religion.
Hmm.
It,
So what you're talking about are theocracies, essentially. Am I right? Like,
yes, I mean, a theocracy I would define as a society that is guided by that follows God's laws.
so
So
again, it's the use of religion as a political tool to bind together and make lawful and a society. Is this correct?
yes, to make the the members of that group know what rules they have to follow. They
Hmm.
have to know what the rules are. They can break it or whatever, but
Yeah,
at least they know what they are or
sure.
meant to be. But
Right.
now it's like nobody knows what the rules are supposed to be.
Right. Well, I'm on again to follow my theme here is to me that's the opposite direction of spirituality. And therefore it's destined to snap off at the root and fly away. And I mean to come back to this is my sort of position on this topic. But and I would argue that Buddhism I don't know about Hinduism because that's extremely culturally Indian, and that's I feel like they're indigenous gods. Although there is a Vedic bridge to pre-Christian uh, Indo-European peoples and people who are studying and trying to revive paganism now are looking at the Vedic teachings to draw those connections. Um, my position here essentially is that no religion slash spirituality will last if it's not based on nature's laws. So then the question becomes, well, what are nature's laws? That's a profoundly deep topic. It's not like, oh, the physics and the basic things. It's more on an atomic level in a sense. This is what Buddhists and Hindus and Taoists are masters of. That's what that's all about, is going down into the deepest wells of human consciousness and coming back. And there's a whole, that's another show. Maybe that'll be your show, on your channel if you want to talk about that.
Hmm.
But so yeah, so this is where you and I'm trying to connect these two threads, your studies and my studies, and how do they make sense? Because if I feel that at some point, well, for starters, Western man has changed. Europeans have changed from, say, the 15th century to now. And I would say for now, I don't know about then, but for now, we're very individualistic. We're for good or for better or for worse. We're extremely individualistic people, and in some ways that's good because we have phenomenal creativity and we invent amazing things. We put a robot on Mars. I mean, wow, the things that we've created, the modern world is astonishing in world history. But at the same time, we're atomized and falling apart. We've lost touch with God, history, each other, and you understand these things. So that's kind of why I'm saying we have to get our anchor into natural law. And when I say natural law, I in a sense mean God as well. It's just there's different lenses and ways of thinking or understanding God. I, in my time, in my lifetime, what I've concluded is that God is the sum of all consciousness. And I think I could just kind of put a bookmark right there, because that again opens up a can of worms. That's a fascinating topic to go into. But if you just tell all these individualists, oh, you have to go back in time and follow these rules from, they're not going to, I don't feel that they're going to do it. And then offering Islam, a foreign religion of people who are terrorists against us, who we've had a civilizational war with for hundreds of years. If you look at Eastern Europe on the border of the Muslim world, and that's unfair to your position, because people can't see past that to the points that you're trying to make. You actually read the Quran. I don't know any Westerner other than a couple like academics who've read it and interpreted it and teach like these are the crazy things about the Quran, or whatever the basis of, like, convert or die, that type of approach. That's all we know of the Quran. So I know I'm throwing tons of points out here, and it's hard to stay focused. But.
So what you're saying is, you see, it's fair enough if you say, well, what you're trying to do, it's most unlikely to happen because, most Westerners have a particular view about Muslims and Islam. And I totally get that. But I'm saying, the correct answer to the question, how do you get to the moon, is still get into a space-worthy vessel and, get there on that, space vessel. Right. So even if you have no access to any space-worthy vessel, that's still the correct answer. Yeah. So I think really, whether we think it's going to happen in our lifetime or not, the correct answer would still be Islam, in my view, because if the problem is, if Western decline is caused by family breakdown, caused by marital breakdown, caused by married fathers no longer being given the respect that they need to even want to be married fathers, then you are going to get collapse of the family. And and I think if you narrow it right down, it's gender relations. It's like everybody's obsessed with gender relations. I know men call it something else,
Well,
but it's the same thing. It's like, how shall we treat each other, men and women? What do we want from each other? How shall we behave towards each other? And the feminists obsess in universities about how this should be done. And Western man is quiet because he doesn't quite feel it's his thing. But this is, I think, the most urgent topic that needs to be discussed, because, it's full of taboos. Women don't want to be thought of as being sluts. Men don't want to be thought of as being uncertain and perhaps frightened. Or perhaps too frightened to even admit how frightened they are. And there is this terrible sense of, let's not talk about it. Let's just sweep it under the carpet and laugh at everything. Well, in the meantime, the problem gets worse.
We know who created feminism and why, and it's been a terrible blight on Western man for sure. It's essentially a cultural attack, and that's where, say, Christianity and traditional gender roles. See, I don't think traditional gender roles depend on Christianity per se. I think that it's just traditional culture that is common and has been common, say, maybe around the world. It's feminism is a specifically highly, how do I explain this? It's designed to destroy a civilization by putting a wedge between men and women, teaching women what they, etc. We're not going to talk about feminism so much, but it's one of the most important things. Yes. So, right. I can see your point then, where very, very traditional conservative gender roles would solve the problem. Again, the Islam thing is a hard sell, especially since they have multiple wives, or they're allowed to marry girls,
They Muslim men are allowed a maximum of four, but I don't think most men are up to having so many. I think men actually confuse this idea of having sexual access to four women and having to pay for them and their children. It's quite a different order of undertaking altogether, I think. So,
Well, the one thing I can say for it is it's highly eugenic. I mean, the idea if every white man had at least two wives and maybe four, then we would solve the population problem in a generation, and that would change the world. I'm not advocating for that. For starters, it's very alien to me. Um, I think it's sort of like biblical to me, like the idea. I just can't jive with it per se, but I can see the logic of it in regards to, like I said,
yeah, I mean, if your numbers have been decimated by
yeah.
two ruinous world wars, like the British,
Mhm.
they should have been practicing polygamy, but instead they let all these, you know, spinsters. There were not, there was a time in British history when everyone had a spinster aunt who couldn't get a man because they'd all, died in those wars.
Right, 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 right.
And and of course, the sensible thing to have done if they wanted to be practical about it was to have allowed polygamy. And I think you can even control it. You can say, well, uh, you might need to apply to the state for a second wife.
Yeah.
They'll say, well, can you afford it?
Well,
How you could.
the state should help us pay for it. That's the things we need policies from the state where the more children you have, the more tax breaks or you actually get paid for it. I believe, I don't know, I think it's either Poland or Hungary has policies like this. I think it's Hungary that has
Mhm.
policies like this now where you're financially incentivized to have bigger families. So again, the polygamy thing is very foreign to Westerners, but it's a very fresh idea. Considering the crisis that we're in, I think in ancient times that's exactly what people would do. Like, we.
The Mormons are American and they still exist.
Correct,
And
correct.
they practice polygamy and they're allowed to have more than four, aren't they?
Well, again, the affording it is
Well,
is is
yes,
the
yes.
is the question. But yeah, I don't. I've actually known of, or met a few Mormons, but I don't know much about that. It's fascinating. These are certainly fascinating things. I like, I think there's a lot to say for your objective and clinical approach to this that's super refreshing. And, we in the, sort of the far right, if you want to call it that, we, in a sense, it's a political bubble and ghetto in its own. They're very, very high IQ people, but it's still kind of an island in itself, and we're just sort of hearing each other's ideas and discussing what would work and how do we implement it and these things. So the concept of polygamy as a eugenic strategy to save the West is something that I think, things have gotten that desperate that we do need to consider that. And I'd never thought I would say that in my whole life. so,
Hmm.
so yeah. Um, but what are your thoughts? I want to go a little bit deeper here. I asked you in an email, what is God? I'd like to know what you think about that.
I think God is at the very least an idea in theory.
Hmm.
So whether the Abrahamic God exists, who is eternal, supreme, omnipotent, omniscient, and perfectly moral, um, it is still a useful idea, even if he does not exist, because people want to believe in such a being, because it's actually very seductive to think that all wrongs will be righted at some point in the future.
Hmm. Hmm.
And he may not exist, in which case, but he will, the idea of God is still useful
Hmm.
to make our laws and
Yeah,
police behavior.
yeah, yeah. What is God then in relationship to death in your mind?
Um, if you believe in God, then it takes away the fear of death, doesn't it?
I guess the question is like, how do you as an agnostic face the thought of your own mortality?
I think whether we believe in God or not, there should be a kind of moral imperative to live the best possible life. Because people who believe in God think, well, this life is an examination hall, so we must do the best according to what we understand and know of God's laws and follow them. And within following these and obeying these laws, we might enjoy, happiness and pleasure, and, that sort of thing.
I guess where I'm grasping for something is that you seem to have, I don't know how to say it yet, just sort of a very purely rational approach to this. And for me, well, not for me, I can make a case for the topic of feeling, whereas you have like thought versus feeling, like rationality versus experience, and feelings, I believe, are just as important as the ability to rationally figure out life in the world. And to take, for me anyway, to take a purely clinical approach to the question of God and mortality is like, you know, sort of like looking at something through glass. You can never touch it. And I can't process that. I can't, to me, that's like inefficient, I guess, in a way. I feel like and that's kind of the theme throughout this discussion is spirituality versus religion. And so like the idea of like God is an idea that does X, Y, Z. I agree. I agree with that. And it's good for X, Y, Z or whatever. But if it's just an idea, then it seems to lack reality. And therefore, if it lacks reality, how can it really work? Does that make sense?
I think people want to believe in it. Even the most cynical atheists, in extremis, they
Mm.
will they will want to believe in it. And I think um, the more frightened we are, the more uncertain we are, we will desire certainty, and the only way to certainty is to have a moral system that is part of a certainty,
Hmm.
which we can make certain, because this is the annoying thing about ideas, isn't it? That we don't know if it's true. But I think really, in a way, it's quite obvious that um, we may not ourselves um, profit from whatever we do. Make whatever sacrifice we decide to do. It might not actually work out well. During our lifetimes, but I suppose that there are a lot of dead heroes, and if they hadn't suffered, then they wouldn't have been remembered. And we have to decide what it is we want to do. Do we want to live quietly to a ripe old age, and when we pop our clogs, people will say, I didn't, I thought this person had died a long time ago. Or we want, this phrase comes to mind: the life of a samurai is not measured by its length.
Mm, mm, Beautiful, excellent example right there with that quote. And I think that the same notion, it does exist in kind of in sort of the Greco-Roman Stoic philosophy of heroism and these kinds of things. Even like French existentialism, I think would agree as well. Even though I think that's godless, there's still that sense of making life the fullest. I don't know.
Yes, but I think that there is a problem. If we think of, well, I'll just do what I like, whenever, or, wherever, with whoever. Um, Lots of people have been living like this, but they're not happy. They're mentally ill. They hate their lives. They have
Yeah, yeah.
poisonous relationships
Well,
with
there
their
you go.
exes.
Okay, so you just tapped into something critical. So they're trying to fill the void, and the media and the sort of drugs and sex and media of all the various distractions that we have cannot fill the void that perhaps God is meant to fill. And that comes back once again to how spirituality, I think, has to be the ground on which civilization cannot be broken away from. This is the point I'm reaching at. I can't 100% say that, this is infallible, but at the same time, it feels like, what you're talking about is morality is actually something that is agreed upon by a large group of people, rather than say something that is naturally based on natural law or right and wrong that it's apparently right, that it doesn't need to be proven. The sky is blue, the grass is green. I don't need to prove those things. Um, so yeah, I think if we can find out where the West went wrong, where we lost our connection to God, then perhaps we can help to root it again, to anchor it again. Does that seem
Yeah.
logical?
Yes, absolutely. But I think, if you do, if you believe in the Abrahamic God, there is a narrative that can be constructed from the history of all the Abrahamic faiths.
Sure.
So, Jews kind of kickstarted the whole idea of Abrahamic religions because Christianity came up in opposition to Judaism. And
Yeah.
then, this idea of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis.
Mhm.
Islam is thesis, Christianity is antithesis, and finally Islam is synthesis. You can look at it, from this Hegelian dialectic, and think, this is almost inevitable when you think about it. You have Judaism, they broke their own rules, they caused so much trouble to the Romans, the Romans,
Yeah.
okay, this is some conspiracy theory, I guess, and they said the Roman propaganda department created this idea of a meek Jesus, a meek
Yeah.
Jew, and
Right.
and to keep the Roman people,
Yeah.
the Roman subjects in subjugation.
Yes. 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 I have to say that I mean, on a scale of 1 to 10, I believe that, I'm around a 6 in believing that Christianity, as we know it, is a Jewish psyop against Europe and European peoples. I I've done enough, not enough. I've done some research on what is available about the life of Christ and the lost years of Christ, where it's understood that he traveled through India and Tibet and came back. And there's Gnosticism, the Gospel of Thomas. That I'm opening up a huge can of worms per se here by even mentioning these things, but I'm interested in knowing, like, what was Jesus's real teachings and how much of that has been changed by the institution of the church over the years. So I'm not discounting Jesus as a holy man, as even perhaps the Son of God or the incarnation of Logos. I can't prove or disprove that, though, right? As far as my approach, I want to know how to do it, how to live, how to die, what is true, what is false, what's good, what is evil. If you're a spiritual teacher, you must show me the methods by which I can attain enlightenment / heaven, whatever it is that you call glory in God. So that's what I'm trying to find from Jesus.
Mhm.
I don't think I can get it from Christianity. So
No, because the scripture is inadequate, because there is not much wisdom. I mean, Sermon on the Mount, it doesn't really say anything very wise, in my view. I mean,
well,
and that's supposed to be the distillation of Christian wisdom, Sermon on the Mount.
which is why I believe, well, if you read, and I'm not an expert on these things, so I would love somebody who is an expert on the Gnostic Bible to come in and fill us in on it, whatever details. The Gospel of Thomas specifically plugs into and opens up a whole gateway of fascinating ideas that, along with several other things that I've researched about the life of Jesus, that culminate and give me reason to believe that Jesus was essentially a kind of an enlightened yogi, and that his lessons were encoded in symbolic language in the Bible, in the New Testament, that had to be encoded in such a way in order to save it from being destroyed by, say, the Pharisees or the Romans. And so, how do you decode that? Translated from Aramaic through Greek to Latin to English. I mean, it's so freaking hard to get
But
to the core of
I
that.
I suppose I
Let me
don't
finish. Let me
quite.
finish. Let me finish. Whereas Buddhism has it all laid out in detail, like a wonderful map with a GPS. So, anyway, now go ahead. You can
I,
respond.
I suppose I'm okay. This is how I chose the religion because it seems to make sense to me. So I'll be talking about the no hide laws, and people go, "Oh, his boo," but I'm saying it's fine. It's useful. It would actually, if you use the no hide laws to grade every ideology, you'll find that maybe it does kind of show you the way towards the best religion for the most people that would be most effective and flexible, but with the appropriate degree of rigidity to get things done. And so if you wanted to fight to rank each Gentile religion according to their conformity with the no-hide laws, you would get Islam at the top because it's the closest thing to Judaism light,
Yeah.
and Buddhism would be atheist, so it would rank below Islam, and Hinduism is obviously idolatry, so that would come below um,
So,
Buddhism, and finally Christianity because of its idolatry and blasphemy. It would be at the bottom, but it's like then people say, oh, but how come the Christians acquired three global empires, and it's like,
because
okay, so you've
Western.
got these three global empires, but all empires come to an end, and people, you can't make people Christian anymore without in some way bribing them, or threatening to burn them at the stake if they don't agree with you that Jesus is God. And this will of course produce a reaction of fear or hatred, or some kind of resistance, and even now it's the consequences are being lived in the West, because when people find out what their ancestors had to put up with, being burned at the stake, being forced into church, having to you know be confirmed in order to be a member of the community, I suppose that they reject it.
How is that different from Noahide and Sharia, though? Those are really brutal, kind of ethnocentric law systems that are against Gentiles. Am I right?
Um, the no-hide laws are what Jews are supposed to be teaching to Gentiles. And I've spoken to a few rabbis, and I know they don't want to rank the four Gentile religions, and I can imagine that maybe they don't want to offend Christians from whom they rely on for the protection of America. They don't want to offend the other religions. They don't want to big up Islam because they know how much the Muslims hate them. So those could be the reasons why rabbis refuse to teach the no-hide laws properly. They know they're supposed to do it, but they do it in such a bad way. Nobody knows what they're on about, including other Jews. Secular Jews in Israel are being converted to Christianity by American Christian organizations flying into Israel to convert them to Christianity. And and some of these rabbis regard it as a racial and religious humiliation that Christians would dare come to Israel and convert Jews into Christianity from right under their noses. So you have a few rabbis getting very angry about it, but that's because they don't even teach Judaism properly to their own people, and of course they have a problem because they. I guess in the olden days, what they did was they because they were hated, they were forced to rely on each other, and if any of them did something heretical, they'd get kicked out, they'd get excommunicated. But because Jews are now equal citizens in the West, it's not such a big deal if they said, well, you can't come to our synagogue anymore. You'll just go to, the one down the road or something.
Yeah.
So they can't really control the behavior of their um, or the tribal members. But then, the Catholic Church used to be, used to excommunicate people like mad.
Yeah.
Presumably, they don't do it now because they'd be afraid that if they excommunicated all the people who criticise the Pope, that there would be no Catholics left.
Yeah.
So they have to kind of look the other way. And maybe that's what, Jews do. And the fact that so many groups of them and they don't accept the authority of each other. And the Reformed Jews are the majority Jews, really. So, I mean, they're the rich, people and who are, kind of, well, okay, I'm basically saying there is a problem with liberalism, and complaining about liberal Jews is complaining about liberalism, really.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously, I think they kind of try to do what they think they're supposed to do, and it's like, oh, liberalism is mainstream culture. Well, let's just be really, really mainstream and be teacher's pet and please our Christian liberal overlords by being even keener liberals, than they are.
There's so many things that you've just said that I have a response to every single one of them, and I'm unable to go and check all the boxes and have to kind of respond in full. I will say that on my channel there's another video about stopping Noahide laws, and I speak to an interesting gentleman, American, who he converted to Hinduism, and he's made his life's work educating people about the dangers of Noahide law. And so we had a very in-depth discussion. I've of course studied what it is, how it works, and I think what I'll just do now is just defer you and the audience to go check out that video to see my thoughts on that.
That's how I found you.
Yeah. Oh, really? How about that?
Yeah. And I just streamed with Vincent this afternoon. We're practically streaming partners, Vincent and me these days.
Interesting. So, well, okay. So, but I think all of this points again and again to the difference between religion in the public sense and religion in the private sense, which I would like to call spirituality. But the more I look at this more and more, religion to me seems to be essentially a political tool. That it is cultural, and it's grounded in theology, it's grounded in history, blah blah blah. But I feel that if your God tells you that you can kill another person if they don't follow your God's laws, then your God is the devil.
There is no such verse in the Quran that says kill non-Muslims because they're non-Muslims.
Well, in Noahide law, I believe there are. That's the idea of Noahide law is to there's I won't go into quoting it. If there's people that are better than me at doing that. As far as the Quran, again, I'm not an expert on that. I look at how people act rather than what is in their book, so to speak. So that's where and I'm sure I'm not right in full about this, and you can hopefully open my mind more. But the relationship we have with Islam is one where convert or die. And I'm not saying that the West hasn't done terrible things. We should never, ever be in their lands. We shouldn't be there warring with them, stealing their resources, or proselytizing or anything. I think they belong there and we belong here. And peace will come when we separate. That's my belief. However, it's funny how the more analytical and rational we get about this, the more political it becomes, and therefore the closer we get to kind of war, with each other, because these dogmas they may. This is the irony of the whole thing. They supposedly all pray to the same God, yet we've been killing and cheating and raping and robbing each other for hundreds of years. How is that religion? How, you know what I mean? How is that spiritual? I don't know if you can respond to
Well,
that.
I don't think it's meant to be spiritual. I mean, I think really the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and whichever group thrives as a result of following their moral system, and the moral system is telling them the right things to do, it's fit for purpose of keeping the group in existence and apart from others, then it's going to work. But it's not enough to say, oh, I'm going to be, whatever religion it is, and then you follow it badly, and it doesn't work. But so obviously, if you do, decide to be, Jewish or Muslim, or it's like you have to do it properly. It's not enough just to say, hey, I'm a Hindu now, and I will be, better than a Buddhist or whatever.
Hmm.
It's but okay, you can look at all these civilizations and you can compare. It's like, what was so great about Islam, or how does it compare to Christianity?
Yeah,
And you can do all that, but you can't really form any conclusion because the story hasn't ended. We're
yeah,
still part of the story. We're trying to, we're in a movie and the movie hasn't finished, and we missed the
sure,
beginning. We'll probably
sure.
miss the end.
I think the missing piece here is that if through a fluke of history the Arab world became Christian and the European world became Muslim, a thousand years ago, we would Europeans would still be Europeans. We would, you see where I'm saying? I think there's a kind of a racial dimension to this that we're not talking about. I mean, it's out there. People understand it, but Europeans are Europeans. We have a certain DNA, we have a certain biospirit, and yeah, we fight with each other and such, but we are a race, and as such, we're capable of doing certain things. So it's just an interesting concept to think through. Would Islam be failing in the West had we been that way, for so long because of our individualism, because of our so-called liberalism, because I feel that religion to me seems it's sort of uh, lack of a better analogy here, it's a kind of a vessel, and then our Western biospirit is the water within the vessel kind of thing. You can't change the suchness of the water, the nature of the water. You can change the shape of it by creating laws and rules and belief systems and norms, customs, these kinds of things. But we're not mud. We're not gasoline. We're not we're a specific kind of bio entity, if you will, and we're gonna
But
behave.
isn't East Coast and West Coast culture in America quite different? And the people are quite different, the way they think, even though they're actually the same race and the same
Well, this is the individualism that is our nature. That's part of what I was referring to. You don't see individualism very much, say, in Asian cultures, which I think is a fairly obvious thing. It might exist more in who knows where. I don't honestly know, but I think it's fair to say that Westerners are, well, I shouldn't use the word Caucasians, let's say European people tend to be the most individualistic, for better or for worse. That's not something
the
that
culture can change. I mean, really, it can, can't it? I mean, you change the
sure,
law and then people will behave in a different way because they want to
sure,
avoid pain and obtain pleasure.
sure.
So, I mean, the law is it,
Well, it
it,
comes
it
back to
is the
prove your
algorithm of
it
hu-
it comes back to prove your
humanity.
point that religion can and has and should work as a glue to kind of hold the society together, protect it, through changes, through wars, political upheaval, et cetera, et cetera. So I I can't disagree with that, and maybe I'm too individualistic to see that in some regard. Maybe I'm at fault in that regard. So it's again, this is just an interesting conversation to kind of torture the data, and like
Mhm.
again, I'm just mining for gold here. I want to, test my understanding, your understanding, and what we know to come to some kind of conclusion. And then obviously for the audience, they have their own knowledge base and experience, and they may be thinking of points that we don't, we're not thinking of. So
Hmm.
it's a very worthwhile discussion, though.
I'm enjoying it because I think often we don't even know what we think until we are forced to express ourselves,
Yeah.
or forced into a corner and say, is this really what you think? Are you really going to do that to, you know? And I think I think we're more fortunate than um, politicians, because I can't imagine that they'd be too frightened of each other to speak to each other.
Mm-mm. You got to wonder about politicians. You
Well,
know?
they won't be having philosophical discussions,
No.
because I can imagine, like, ooh, I'll just wait for them to say the wrong word, and then I can tell, the media that so and so said this thing that could be, implied to mean that they don't like Jews, or they're sexist, or whatever. So, I think, possibly ordinary people are more fortunate in being able to have the time and the platform to develop their ideas.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh,
Well, there's very much to be said still about these things. I think what is key is coming up with the right questions, and because if for example, we all see through different frames, let's say, and sometimes we're limited by that. Like, for example, you gave me the idea that, Westerners, Europeans should be practicing polygamy as a way to solve this problem of white genocide. And I'm like, I can't disagree with that, even though it goes against my cultural norms and my history or whatever, Catholicism and American culture, et cetera. It's actually illegal in most places. I don't know about with the Mormons, but so you have to sometimes break out of your lens, and something I've been trying to reflect back to you is how you have a very rational lens, and how you look at religion as what seems to me like a, an approach to an answer to what's happening in the West, whereas I'm approaching it as spirituality, true
but
spirituality.
I think I can be spiritual too. I mean, I just don't like to talk about it because, people will just go, oh, it's so silly what you believe, and I suppose it's also, personal in a way, and of course
Yeah.
you have no way of being certain about what's going to happen to your immortal soul, if such is it you possess, after you are dead. So it seems to me, perhaps a waste of time to talk about it, but at funerals, and when you think of the of departed, loved ones, we think about them, and
Yeah.
we wonder, what has happened to them, and I think, as far as spirituality goes for me, I think, some people do have an immortal, soul, in the sense that they can still live on in our memories after they are dead. And they would be usually people who, did a lot for us, our parents, and any, famous dead person that we're inspired by, whose deeds or
Well,
achievements. And
let's.
so certain people do have an
I, I
afterlife.
I guess I want to say that let's just imagine for a moment that nobody was listening and nobody cared and nobody would criticize you for just kind of exploring an unknown area of, you know how do I have spiritual experience? How do I know for certain God exists, the afterlife exists? What and how would that relate to the way that I live now? How would it change me fundamentally as a person? you know I don't know if you've even dared to explore that, or if it's just too intimate, because I strongly respect like the intimacy of spiritual practice. It's just between you and your practice, your Buddha or your God or whatever, what you're practicing. But
Hmm.
and there is the challenge of, am I just fantasizing here? Am I tricking myself into believing things? How do I know that it's true? There are ways to know, and I've spent my entire life trying to find those answers. I've found those answers, but I don't dictate them or preach them to others. and I
Hmm.
have a huge problem with people who do. So I get it, you know.
Hmm.
That's one of the biggest turnoffs to me of religion in general. You know, I feel like it's, if you have to sell your religion, then it's can't be, you know, there's something wrong about that. I don't jive with it, you know.
Yeah.
But
But
I really am, I don't know, perhaps if you don't want to talk about it,
no,
it's
I'm happy to talk about it. So what you're saying is, what is my spiritual practice? I mean, I don't pray. I mean, I don't do prostrations. I'm not a Muslim, but but I can tell you something about Islam, which is the idea of God consciousness, which I'm sure is not unique to Islam. It's like, you have to think of God all the time.
Mhm.
If you can,
Yeah.
apart from just when you pray or whatever.
Yes.
And I think it is possible to internalize these rules and to imagine a universe in which he does exist, and which he controls perfectly. And then you can have an idea of what he might be trying to do if you think that the pandemic has, a divine source. Because, if you already believe in God, then you think, well, if we're being punished for our sin, right? I mean, that would be, you would
To
be
me, that,
thinking about that.
yeah, that for me, that's a superstitious way of approaching God. But I do get it, and I don't think it's uncommon. It's probably more common than anything. But I did want to push back a little bit on the notion that Buddhism is atheistic. I think that if your definition of God is exclusive to the Abrahamic tradition, then it looks like it's atheistic. But um, you know, and then what's a Buddha and what's a God? Lowercase g, God. Maybe aliens are gods. I mean, we could really open it up and have a discussion about that. If Anyway, I don't know if you want
Yeah,
to go
but
in
you,
that
you seem
direction.
to reject the idea of the Abrahamic God, the,
Oh, not at all.
unique,
But
supreme God.
I'll try to. And this is difficult to do, but I'll try to be concise about this. As I said earlier, I believe that God is the, and this description is still kind of warped in a sense, but that God is the sum of all consciousness. So consciousness cannot exist alone. It must have
A body.
something to be conscious of, right? Therefore, you have multiple dimensions of energy, light, sound, and we live in the third dimension, and the spirit realms are in higher dimensions, and God is the summation of all of those dimensions, conscious of and creating itself. And so it within the third dimension, we're limited by our perception of time. Our senses are the only tools with which we have to apprehend meaning and life and experience, and to draw logical conclusions from. So if you only had, a rock and a stick, what could you build with it? You see what I'm saying? Because that's in the third dimension. That's, we don't have a lot, but we if you practice certain meditation practices, etc., you can go deeper into consciousness and experience. I've had many paranormal experiences in my life that give me the foundation of, okay, this is real. Now I know it. So that's a whole other discussion that maybe we can go into on your show. But so where am I going with this? So what's the Abrahamic God? I think that Yahweh, for example, to me seems like a lowercase g God that is maybe the God of a people in the desert. And I don't mean to say this in an offense to Yahweh. I'm not trying to gain his wrath. That's not my intent by saying this. But it's almost like my word for God is even bigger than that in a sense, and it's maybe what Christians, Muslims, and Jews also believe in or also agree with, this idea that God is ineffable, that there really isn't any words that can and even that could encompass the totality of God if we understand the full, not only the physical universe, but dimensions, all these extra dimensions of the universe, or multiple universes. So it gets silly, it gets crazy to talk about it. So we have to personify it, we have to anthropomorphize it in order for it to make sense and work on this plane of existence. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Okay, so in that case, it's kind of like a piece of clay that you mold, or let's say a golden calf, if you will. I mean, we construct images and ideas and dogma and blah 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 of God as we understand God to be. I used to do consultation with the local Native American nation, and I learned a lot about I really dug in, like, what do you believe? Why do you believe it? What is God? What is heaven? What is life? And I find that, like, most indigenous religions, if you want to call them that, have a common thread. They're all based on, like, animus, sort of natural law. There's just something to that that's worth investigating. Whereas I feel the Abrahamic religions are not. They don't share what indigenous religions have. There's something unique about them, that this Jewish God from the desert of 5,000 years ago or so is a Jewish creation. It's an idea that is perhaps a God. And is it the God? Is it the big G God, or is it a small G God? I can't tell you that. I don't know. Judging by
Well,
the way.
nobody can think of anything more powerful than the Abrahamic God, can they? It is
Well,
a
what
very
defines
powerful
power?
idea.
Like,
It is.
my understanding is the way you're defining power is how to make a society cohesive and dominant and survive through time. That is what I'm getting from you. Am I right in that understanding?
Yes, and Judaism has kept Jews in existence and apart from other groups.
Well said. Okay, I mean, that point taken. But why is it that, okay? So this is your case for Christianity being at the bottom of the pyramid of the Abrahamic religions, and
Yes, because of the idolatry and the blasphemy. And I was trying to explain to
for
Vincent
sure.
earlier, why it's a bad thing. And we both know that Vincent's and he's Hindu, therefore he's an idolater, and he's a proud idolater. He can't see the problem of being an
But
idolater. So, you know,
here's here's the problem with that, though. That is like, and it's essentially opinionated. It's looking through a lens of saying, I have exclusive ownership of the truth, and I'm the chosen one, I'm the chosen people, and only I define what God is. And if you don't worship my God, you're a idolater. You see the subjectivity of that, the bias?
I know that it's annoying. I know it's annoying. Okay, I totally get that. But
Yeah.
if they're right, then they're right. And if you think of Hinduism, well, not exactly top of the tree as regards, being the most powerful nation or race around, right?
Hmm.
And if you're thinking in political terms, you'll think, you want the best religion of the most powerful people.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so, it remains the fact that Jews do worship the most powerful God conceivable, and may even be
I'm getting your
credited,
point.
shock horror, as
Yeah.
being the religion that Christianity and Islam derived from.
I totally understand what you're saying. In relationship to saving the West, this is an extraordinarily central and important discussion. And there's, I don't have all the answers on it, but I'm excited to engage in this, and so happy to, get a chance to talk to you about it specifically, because I can't say that I know anybody who's actually investigating this maybe as rigorously as you, as objectively as you, though, right? I mean, we have our Michael Jones, we have our Mark Brahmans, we have our Donald Kents, or whatever, with the, Buddhism and Catholicism, Apolloism, but and our Claire cause, with your advocating for, uh, Islam, secular Islam.
Well, but
So
the thing is, I think people are afraid. I know what Westerners think of Muslims and Islam, and they think of it as, low status immigrant culture. I totally understand, and a lot of Chinese, they would never dream of becoming Muslim because there is undoubted racial snobbery involved.
oh yeah, oh
You
yeah.
only follow the religion of the powerful people. You
Uh,
don't follow.
and we're all guilty of it. I mean, Jews, Christians, Muslims, we're all guilty of that kind of bias. But whatever, we have to, because that's actually the real lens here, is that it's a racial competition, that and the world is, and that's life on earth, and that's the big problem that spirituality is trying to solve, and religion, I don't believe, can solve it. I'm distinguishing these two, so I'm bringing it back to my central point that, but at the same time, it's almost insanely utopian, right? I mean, the go live in a mountain and meditate and pray the rest of your life. That's that's not going to help. We have
No.
to survive in this racial war. But is there a way we can end this racial war? And
I actually don't think it's racial. Okay, you've heard of all these ethno-nationalists. You know what? They leave white countries, they go and live in some non-white country.
yeah,
Yeah, and they are the minority. They don't see, it's like, well, they can't hate abroad that much then if they go to Japan and say, oh, it's so nice here. Everybody's so Japanese.
yeah,
And I could kind of see that, it doesn't matter what race you are, you go to a different country, you expect them to be doing their thing and looking, whatever you think that they are uniquely, that is uniquely characteristic of them. And so, you're happy when you go to Texas and you see, people looking like Texans and, that kind of thing. And you don't want, suddenly lots of your own people suddenly transported to the place that you are visiting. So, but anyway, this is how mixed up we are. And okay, so what I'm trying to say is that it's really a status issue. So white people who get fed up with the things in the West is because they don't think that they had as high a status as they imagine they had in the past, and they don't like it, and they think it's something to do with immigrants coming in, and that might be part of it, and it's also their relationship with with their women.
hmm
So it's all this the sense of we feel, we perceive that our
yeah.
status has lowered. We see these people we don't like, and we are okay. There's this idea of we mustn't confuse a symptom with a disease.
Thank you.
So I'm
Yeah.
saying these are all symptoms. A real disease is something you can't see, and this would be your failed moral system.
Right. That's the discussion that we're trying to have. It's not the topical things about immigration or whatever, but the failure. And I guess it seems to me like, what is the relationship between race and religion? That might, that's a very huge question, very broad.
Jews
Even
come in four colors.
they do.
Well, yeah, there's the white Jews, the brown Jews from India,
Oh,
the some
okay.
black
Yeah,
Jews.
and Christianity is deracinated. Islam, I believe, is as well. But um, so yeah, I suppose what you're saying then is that it isn't dependent on race; it's dependent on religious ideology, if you will. So I see Judaism and Islam not as religions, but as invader ideologies. That's the Muslims being the violent sword driven invaders, using their quote religious ideology, whereas the Jews are the sneaky subversive kind of hustlers that sneak their way in and interbreed and pretend to be part of you, and then subvert you from the inside. So there's nothing religious or spiritual about either of those behaviors. And I wonder, are those racial behaviors or are those religious behaviors? Here I'm using religion as ideology, though. Is it political behaviors? Because one likes to understand that, religion is supposed to be about peace, love, man's relation to God, family, tradition, culture. What religion says, go into these other lands and take over. I mean,
People don't need encouraging to do that, though, do they?
well,
They just do it anyway.
so like I just feel like if we're going to have a discussion about religion as a medication for this problem or an answer to this problem, then it seems like we really have to get under the hood and break it down and separate the parts.
Yes,
Um,
and Islam has, principles of warfare and foreign relations and treaties and so it does talk in terms of international relations,
mhm.
and I kind of see that, if the world were Muslim, just for um, if we can imagine that, then it would be easier to deal with each other because we'd all be agreed on what foreign relations should be, and the abolition of usury, and a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
So, but we still have differences. I don't think there's any guarantee that once all countries are Muslim, everything would be fine, except that maybe the war won't be so bad because not quite so many atrocities would be committed, because there are rules that are already in the Quran saying you mustn't, um, operate a scorched earth policy and
Yeah.
poison wells and cut down
Yeah.
trees when
Yeah.
you're fighting your enemy. And if people respected that would make war less prone to nasty genocidal atrocities, for
Yeah. Yeah.
example.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it's It's interesting. I would imagine if our biblical scholars were here, they would be saying, "Oh, well, verse something, chapter something, it says this about that," and everybody has a kind of an answer for everything, yet nothing works, and that's the problem. Is
There's nothing in the New Testament, really. I mean, there's nothing in it about
oh,
foreign relations or anything. I mean,
yeah.
you'll be hard put to find
I'm hearing you.
anything
I'm hearing you.
concrete.
Perhaps the Old Testament. I'm not a biblical scholar. I have friends that if they, if and when they listen to this, they'll, you know, basically explode with like all this data, or quotes of the Bible, etc. But that's fine. I don't know. I'm left, I suppose, with more questions, but my questions are much more pointed. I have a clearer idea of this topic. I just had a show on Imperium Art with Joel Davis, and the theme of the show was about spirituality being kind of the groundwork for our white well-being movement. And it's a topic that I don't think we're talking about enough. Again,
Mhm.
you say like Dave Martell is teaching about Germanic paganism. You've got Mark Brahman teaching about Apolloism. You're talking about what you're talking about. E. Michael Jones. We have different camps and thoughts and ideas here.
Mhm.
So I suppose
So
time.
you were talking. I think he's appeared twice on my channel. Um, so
Which
that's good. I should see what you said to him
are you
about
talking?
spirituality, you say.
Oh, Joel Davis, that is.
Mhm.
Yeah, I strongly urge you to watch the show. It's a really good show. I'd say it's definitely one of the best shows that we've had on Imperium Art. That art, or rather, that show is art related. It's a bit of a niche. It's an
Mhm.
important niche. Is the discussion about how do the arts interface with politics and philosophy for white well-being for this it's a platform. Essentially, it's meant to be a documentary, like an ongoing documentary.
So you're talking in terms of um, the dissident right having a kind of um, branded culture or artistic expression that will be recognizable. Is that what you're basically kind
I
of
think
talking
I
about?
would it's not as rough as that. It's a little more defined, but at the same time, it's evolving now. It's growing now. There's an enormous cultural scene, mostly music, but visual arts as well. I just did the cover to the White People's Quarterly, and that issue is all mostly all on visual arts in the white positive movement. And
Hmm.
you know, it's worth stopping and saying we don't call ourselves the dissident right, because there's nothing dissident about white well-being. Although our Jewish friends would like to destroy that.
What
And
do you call yourselves now?
white positive sphere, white well-being. I mean, I'm not hung up on titles. The movement has essentially said, like, ditch the alt right. That's old. That's dead. Dissident right was kind of the cool thing, and then people start realizing, like, why are we calling ourselves dissidents? We're the normal ones. We're playing into the hands of the Marxists, who make us look like we're radicals, and we're normal. We just want our sovereignty, you know, which is a human right, if you will. But so yeah, the arts the arts of this movement, what we call the white well-being movement. It's part of white identity politics in general.
Mhm.
It's
Have you heard of Alison Chablo?
Can you say that again? I didn't hear.
Have you heard of Alison Chablo?
Alison Chablo?
Chablo. Oh, I thought you might have heard because
I'm
she's
sorry,
she says
please introduce me.
Holocaust didn't. Well, she's in trouble with the authorities for her Holocaust denying song, and I was wondering if you'd heard of it.
Well,
Um, since we were talking about music.
I'm pretty, well versed on all things Jewish insurrection, everything to do with, like, what's going on, the New World Order, globalism, Zionism. I'm very well read on that. I guess I can't say I know every single person who's
Mhm.
involved in it, but yeah.
Yeah. Well,
But that, sorry, go ahead.
oh, I anyway, it's called Survivors, and basically it's a song denying the Holocaust, in
Oh, oh,
satirical terms.
okay.
And I think, well, I think she's very talented,
Well, please link
and
it up. Yeah, connect me.
yes, I'm just doing it now
Yeah, I
for you.
don't shy away from that topic. I mean, on the one hand, we have to be cautious of sort of how, what's the word? Like, we have a right to be angry and to have malice against the people that are trying to destroy us and that are successfully destroying us. To be killing somebody and then punish them for complaining that we're being killed is the pinnacle of sickness. I think it's to punish people for that is so dark. So, but at the same time, we in the white positive sphere have to be positive. We have to demonstrate it's about loving our people, not hating others. And
Mhm.
and naturally, there's all kinds of great. I've had many great Jewish friends. I've had great Black friends. I've worked with Muslims. I understand the gray scale of kind of the quote the good ones and all that, but specifically regarding the Jews, I feel that it's critical that we talk openly about it, but not with malice. Rather, that we talk facts and we just
Mhm.
expose the facts. Like, well, you're doing this. We know why you're doing it. We know where the money's coming from. We know where it's going. We know all the systems. We get it. And we're not going to allow this to happen. We wish you well. Madagascar awaits you. Go do your own thing. You do you. We'll do us. We'll pursue our destinies separately, and God bless you. Goodbye. Like, we don't want parasites in our culture. And that's it. It's not that we want to hurt them, but the psychosis of it is they're driven by the belief that we do, which is why they want to destroy us and subsume us. Partially. Go ahead. Go ahead.
You think it's deliberate or?
Absolutely. Oh my God, it's profoundly designed. It's ancient. I mean, I really believe that there's a sense of revenge for what happened, the destruction of the temple and
Okay, and
time.
you're saying feminism was invented by
Yes.
them
Yeah, the
because.
Frankfurt School, you can all draw it back to cultural Marxism. Yeah. These aren't mistakes, and they're exclusively Jewish inventions. So
So
they
should we
don't.
confuse? I mean, is there any danger of confusing Jews with Judaism?
See, this
Because
is what fascinates me is I would love to know what is the spirituality of Judaism and Islam. But let's focus just on Judaism to see if Jews who are doing this white genocide could in some way be reconnected with their spirituality so that they pursue their destiny in their religion and leave Western civilization unmolested. Does that make sense? Is
but
such big.
most of them have basically gone native, right? They have gone native, which is a problem. And I think if you get all these liberal Jews and liberalism is a problem, then you've got double trouble. Because if you've privileged Jews above Gentiles and they promote an ideology that is officially yours, but they promote it harder and faster, then you have got a problem on your hands.
Oh, we have a
Which
big.
means that the best way to deal with it is to admit that liberalism is a problem.
Well, the question then is how do we solve it? Not where does it come from and da da da. And I mean that relates to it. We have to know who is propagating it. We know the whole system, right? I mean that everybody involved in our political sphere is aware of the system, the globalist Zionist system, how it works, the money, the structure, the media, the law, infiltration of the United States government, the EU, on and on and on. 9/11. I mean, it goes back and back and back in history. Michael Jones is brilliant at talking about these things. But how do we fix it? So I guess we're kind of doing a full circle here. We're coming back to you're suggesting.
With the failure of Christianity, which must surely be why there
Well,
doesn't appear to be, yeah, we can think of do this, do that, but nobody will do it. We wonder why we can't do all these things that we used to take for granted anymore. And nobody ever asks the question because there's nobody above us in politics who cares enough to stand up for any principle. And I think it's because if you don't have a
right.
religion, you won't care about any
Okay.
principle because it
Okay.
wouldn't be drummed into you that maybe you're the person you're with a group of people who never eats pork, who never drinks alcohol, who
Yep.
always rests on the
Yeah.
Sabbath.
So you're gonna really enjoy the episode with Joel Davis. It approaches this topic from essentially my angle, which is the spiritual angle. Now, I get that's not there's not a clear answer. I get that Christians are going to advocate for Christianity. I don't know how you can take someone who doesn't, let's say, has no belief or is a liberal or something, and then somehow convince them that Christianity is the answer. That seems impossible to my mind, without the grace of God coming down like a lightning bolt and saying, "Hey, I'm here. This is it." Like that. That's another topic, but um, you know,
Yeah, but Christianity, okay, there is a problem with Christianity simply because its definition is so specific. It's like not only do you have to believe that God exists, you have to believe that Jesus is also God, that somehow he was God, before he was even
I
born,
get
and
it. I
then he
get it.
became God again. And
Yeah,
and that is so crazy that but anyway, the church always won the argument because they could, conduct the Inquisition or burn you at the stake. So you
sure.
knew
So,
to
right,
shut up.
right. To have people just come to this conclusion. Anyway, right. That's problematic. I get that, which is why the discussion moves to a deeper plane, a deeper level, which is the question of spirituality in the West. And so, you know, I have spent my life's work has been to investigate spiritual practices. If I want to learn how to play piano while riding a unicycle and speaking French, I I would have to study all those three things and then master them and put them together into a practice. That's obviously a goofy, silly example, but to not do the work and expect results is ridiculous. It's absurd. You have to learn what is the metaphysics of prayer. What is how does faith and natural law connect? What's the alchemy of meditation? if you just read books and talk about it, you're just a joke. You have to do the damn work and suffer through it and break yourself into another being. When I lived in Japan and I studied Zen in Kyoto, and I broke myself. I broke my own will to find this truth, and I developed my initial root in what it is that I'm seeking. And then from that root, I was able to grow and then blossom and bear fruit from my spiritual practice. So I'm not here to sell that to anybody. That was my path, and if people want to discuss how do we save the West and approaching it through spirituality, you had better do some work. You have to have some kind of like real root in these experiences, which is not analytical entirely. It is analytical to a point, and then you have to cut the rope and free fall into it, into the abyss, and then become the light. So I know what I'm saying is getting a little esoteric, but if you don't go through the mythological transformation and come out on the other side in some enlightened way, it's just theoretical, it's just analytical, and it's dead. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like this is where I'm heading. I'm not preaching or selling this idea, but it appears that to save Western civilization, we Westerners must have a spiritual revolution, if you will.
And the spiritual revolution, I think, can only come with a great event or a big idea, and
well, white
believing in
genocide
God again is a pretty big idea.
Yeah, white genocide is a pretty big event and motivation,
And
But
and so you need to think of okay. Before we leave the subject of spirituality, I'm suggesting that maybe spirituality is the desire to feel well looked after by your government, so you feel good and happy, and that your government is, just doing the right. I know it sounds childish, but maybe this is what we want. We want to feel safe again. We
sure.
want to know that the people in charge are the people who should be in charge.
Yes,
And we just want, okay, maybe all these aspirations for this thing called spirituality is a desire for justice. Maybe
All
that's
right.
it.
That's a beautiful notion. That's a very interesting conclusion. I'm really pleased with that. And I think it actually bridges your database with my database, if you will. Like, the justice and spirituality. That's a fascinating connecting point, and I think a good point on which we can talk to people in white identity politics and say, your desire for justice is a spiritual thing, because it's I take it like the Tibetan genocide cause, for example. I studied Tibetan Buddhism for 10 years. I'm familiar with a lot of things. One of my lamas was the translator to the Dalai Lama, so I have some knowledge about that. I almost moved to India, Dharamsala, to help refugees. That's another story. But think about, that's a sort of a smaller case. We have you have a country that is profoundly precious, and the Himalayas, etc. Communist China invades, takes it over, systematically genocides the people, exiles the leader, and so they're saving their culture, and is a spiritual battle, that it's saving their form of Buddhism because that's inseparable from their culture. So, I don't know, maybe a Christian would say, well, then we must save Christianity. And to me, I'd say, sure, here's a sword, go fight. Like, Christians are so docile that there needs to be a new brand of Christianity, I guess. I mean, that might be their way. I don't think there's going to be one answer. There's going to be an answer for the pagans and the Christians and the agnostics and whatever else you got,
Maybe Christianity is for the older white people, and maybe the younger white people will kind of see, well, Islam is the religion of the future. They might say that and think that.
I mean, we associate Islam with total erasure and total like death. So I don't know if you're able somehow to distill the idea and make it like show or demonstrate in
Well,
some way.
Richard Spencer and Ed Dutton, I know that, okay, they're going
That's
to
true.
be all satirical about it, but in the end, they can't stop themselves
It,
from returning to the subject
yeah,
because,
I
it exciting, it's a
here's
subject of horrid fascination.
here that's very well described. Is it is it the race or is it the religion that's doing that though? Because, let's say a religion is a car and the race is that's driving the car, like where does it go? How is it used? So is it the, you know, I don't want to say barbaric, but like, is it the warring nature of the people of the Middle East and Arabs and Africans that makes it work? That they went in, across Asia and went into temples and slaughtered all these people and burned all their sutras and smashed their temples and you know because if they came and said, "Hey, wow, hi Buddhists, we got this other religion, check it out, let's discuss it," and then Buddhists said, "Oh, forget Buddhism, we want to be Muslims." You see where I'm going with this? It's like it's a there's a difference between religion and who's wielding the religion, if you will. So I don't know. I again, I'm just coming up with more questions than answers, but hopefully
It's
this.
about the rules, I would say, quickly that they're all about the rules, and the success of your religion depends on how well you follow the rules. You could, interpret them in a um, in the wrong way and destroy yourself. Because there's so many ways of interpreting laws. Even you can have the liberal rule, you could have the conservative, rigid, traditionalist view. You could be innovative, and I suppose people never really know they're doing the right thing until the civilization has crashed and burnt. I don't know, but it's something you know something that we should discuss
Yeah.
when a lot of these ideas are political ideas. They haven't been thought through. We haven't been told about anything about this sort of thing at school. Normal people don't talk about it,
Hmm.
and so it's important that we talk about these things rather than blaming people, because I think sometimes you think, oh, those people, I've never liked them, they might as well be useful to me if I can just blame everything on them, because I never liked them, and it means I don't have to examine what I might have done
I
wrong to
I don't.
deserve the bad stuff that might have
Yeah,
happened to me.
I don't subscribe to that. I think that's an oversimplification. I think that it's people's behavior, especially Westerners. We are open-minded enough to say, hey, okay, I get you're Muslim or you're black or you're this or that, but how do you behave? How do you treat me now? And if the behavior of that specific individual is good, then it's like, all right, well, cool, we can get along even though the group behaviors may be extraordinarily negative and violent against us white people in this case, then we're somehow able to. I don't know. Liberals and normies, conservatives, sometimes they're always defending our enemies. Oh well, they're not all bad, and that kind of like that's not even the topic. I'm fine if someone there's a black guy lives down the street from me, he's got a good job, nice house, family. He's not the problem. I'm not worried about him. I'm worried about, Black Lives Matter coming into my neighborhood and breaking into houses and shooting people, you see, or what have you, that kind of thing. So it's, I feel
It's
it's,
a
it's,
law and order problem, isn't it? It's like, suddenly this group has been given some kind of legal immunity from prosecution, and they're allowed to do these things that are obviously
so
illegal,
here's
right?
where
From what you've just said.
I agree to an extent. And then the other extent of it is this: people who I have to say, like, I would say, like Arabs and Africans, I think they demonstrate more lawless behavior than Europeans, and therefore need harsher rules, harsher punishments in order to keep their societies cogent and cohesive. I'm not saying that whites are angels and don't do law, they don't break laws, and I'm not trying to create an oversimplified caricature of these peoples. There's clearly great, people from Africa and the Arab states, but we do have to speak in some generalizations. And I might be wrong, but this is what I see. You
Well,
have to,
if they break the law, then you punish them. But the
well,
thing
cutting
about
off
liberal
people's
enforcement
hands.
of laws is that it doesn't seem to be very rigorous, and people think they can get away with it.
I know I guess again, once again, it's a question. How much does sort of racial DNA play a role into following these rules that we believe religion is providing and keeping a society together? So, I'm it's good to be, how do I say, doubtful and to question the idea, to get around it and see how well an idea holds up.
Hmm. Hmm.
But yeah, this has been the most amazing 2 hours. Thank you so much for joining me, for some of your time and sharing your thoughts and working with me through these concepts.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and I hope we can talk again about these fascinating
I
issues that
hope
you
a lot.
cover.
I hope we can have a lot of conversations about this. It's super important. It's extremely fascinating, and it's just delightful to talk to you. You're just a lovely, graceful person. So I'm really happy to know you.
Oh, thank you, Donald. I hope we will have many similar
Yes, let
conversations, and
us
thank you very much for having me
let's
on.
solve all the world's problems.
Yes, yes, in
Right.
theory, if not in
In theory.
practice.
All right. All right. Well, thank you so much, Claire, and thank you to the audience. Please share, comment. This was an extremely amazing and difficult and exciting and complex discussion. Once again, we maybe created more questions than answers. Let us know what you thought, what you took away from this. If you have new perspectives to bring to this, how we might implement strategies to help stop these racial wars and create an actual spiritual world where people are, comfortable and safe and happy and fulfilled. So God bless you all, and we'll see you on the internets. Bye bye.